Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The Senate votes 51 to 49 to advance Trump's sweeping tax and spending bill, setting up all-night debate amid fierce divisions. The 940-page plan boosts defense and tax cuts, but a non-partisan group warns it could add $4 trillion to the US debt. Iran's judiciary says an Israeli strike on Tehran's Evin prison killed at least 71 people days after a ceasefire ended 12 days of war. Spokesman Agsar Jangahir confirms the deadly attack hit the heavily fortified complex during Israel's June 13th bombardment. Israel's military tells northern Gaza residents to evacuate to the south, warning of intense operations to target Hamas strongholds. Spokesman Avichai Ardere says strikes will intensify and expand to destroy terrorist capabilities after 20 months of war. Jeff Bezos and Sanchez wrap up their lavish Venice wedding as hundreds protests mass tourism, sky-high rents and inequality. The No Space for Bezos march draws 700 locals who slam his Trump ties and Venice's elitist image. Around 140,000 students and citizens rally in Belgrade, Serbia, demanding early elections after a deadly station collapse sparked months of unrest. What began peacefully turned violent as riot police and protesters clashed, with tear gas, stun grenades and several injuries reported. Up to 200,000 people flood Budapest streets for Pride, defying Prime Minister Viktor Orban's ban in a colourful, peaceful rebuke. Mocking banners, drag t-shirts and a carnival atmosphere transformed the city as attendance skyrocketed from just 35,000 last year. US President Trump blasts Israeli prosecutors, saying the US won't stand for Netanyahu facing corruption charges after billions in US aid. Netanyahu, indicted in 2019 for bribery and fraud, denies all allegations in his ongoing trial. Lebanon's Health Ministry says Israeli strikes have killed 3 people in the south, violating an active ceasefire. Hezbollah hints its patience is running out as Israel confirms hitting targets in Maruna. Now, our top story today, a major win for US President Donald Trump and his sweeping tax and spending package. Dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill, has cleared a crucial Senate vote, moving the legislation one step closer to becoming part of American law. With a narrow 51 to 49 vote, Senate Republicans pushed the nearly 1,000-paged bill forward, despite some eternal dissent. Senators Tom Hills, Ron Johnson and Rand Paul broke ranks, siding with the Democrats to demand a full reading of the legislation before its passage. But the majority held, and President Trump took to Truth Social to celebrate, calling it a great victory for the Republican Party and personally thanking key allies, Senators Rick Scott, Mike Lee, Ron Johnson and Cynthia Lummis for their support. The bill, central to Trump's second-term agenda, would extend his landmark 2017 tax cuts, boost military and border security spending, and reshape Medicaid to focus aid on what the administration calls truly needy. It also includes funding for immigration crackdowns while rolling back parts of welfare spending. In his message, Trump emphasized the bill's wide-ranging impact, from reducing wasteful spending to protecting gun rights and veterans, saying God bless America and make America great again. Democrats continue to criticize the bill, warning that it disproportionately benefits the wealthy, slashes healthcare for low-income Americans, and balloons the national debt. Independent analysts say the bill could add $4 trillion to US debt over the next decade. The legislation now heads into another round of votes, including debate and potential amendments, before it returns to the House of Representatives for final approval. Now we turn over to Europe, where Ukraine's top commander, Oleksandr Syrsky, says intense fighting is underway near the eastern city of Kostiantynivka, a major target in Russia's campaign to seize the Donetsk region. Writing on Telegram, Syrsky said Russian forces are attempting to advance on 3 fronts, but have suffered heavy losses without making significant gains. He described the assault as a fresh onslaught on the key city. Ukrainian troops have been defending Kostiantynivka for months, amid calls for civilians to evacuate as infrastructure crumbles. In northeastern Sumy region, Syrsky also reported Ukrainian troops had repelled a powerful Russian attack near Yablonivka, where Moscow is attempting to establish a border buffer zone. Meanwhile, Russia claims to have captured the village of Chernovaya Zerka near the Dnipropetrovsk border, though Kiev has denied reports of any further advances in that area. Moscow continues to push for control over all of Donetsk while pressing Kiev to recognize its claims over 4 Ukrainian regions. Now, in a related development, Russian Culture Minister Olga Lyubimova arrived in North Korea, leading to a 125-member delegation of performers in a visit aimed at deepening cultural ties between Moscow and Pyongyang. Lyubimova praised the growing cooperation, saying cultural relations between the two countries have reached unprecedented heights, crediting agreements made by Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The delegation includes artists from the renowned Pyatnitsky Choir and the Guzel dance troupe, with concerts and lectures planned in Pyongyang over the coming days. The visit comes as Russia and North Korea continue to strengthen ties following Moscow's war on Ukraine. The two nations recently signed a treaty that includes a mutual defense pact. Additionally, reports have now confirmed the involvement of North Korean troops in supporting Russian operations, specifically in efforts to expel Ukrainian forces from the Kursk region. Now we move on once again in a significant development aimed at easing global trade tensions. The group of 7 nations, otherwise known as G7, have collectively agreed to avoid imposing higher taxes on companies based in the United States and the United Kingdom. This agreement was reached during their recent summit, where leaders tackled the escalating concerns over the ongoing trade war that has unsettled international markets. The trade war, marked by a series of tit-for-tat tariffs and retaliatory measures primarily between the US and several of its trading partners, has created uncertainty for businesses worldwide. By pledging not to raise taxes specifically targeting US and UK firms, G7 members hope to signal their commitment to maintaining open markets and fostering a cooperative economic environment. Leaders emphasise the importance of predictable and fair taxation policies as a foundation for economic stability. They acknowledged that aggressive tax hikes or protectionist tactics could exacerbate the trade dispute, leading to slower global growth and increased market volatility. Economic experts have welcomed the G7 stance, viewing it as a potential turning point in the trade war. This agreement represents a meaningful step towards de-escalation, said a trade analyst. It underscores the importance of dialogue and collaboration over confrontation in resolving complex economic issues. Looking ahead, the G7 has indicated its willingness to engage in broader negotiations, focusing on harmonizing trade and tax frameworks, aiming to create a more balanced and transparent international trading system. Now we move to Eastern Europe, where Budapest witnessed its largest ever Pride March, with organisers estimating between 180,000 and 200,000 participants, marking a significant act of defiance against Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government-imposed ban on LGBTQ+ events. The 30th annual Budapest Pride Parade became a powerful symbol of resistance as thousands gathered to celebrate LGBTQ+ rights and challenge the government's restrictive policies. Despite facing threats of heavy fines and surveillance, including facial recognition technology, participants marched through the city centre, waving rainbow flags and chanting slogans for equality and democracy. Mayor Grigsley Karakovsky played a pivotal role by designating the event as a municipal gathering, circumventing the ban and ensuring its continuation. International figures, including Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, also joined the march, condemning the government's actions and expressing solidarity with the LGBTQ+ community. The overwhelming turnout has been interpreted as a significant political statement, challenging Orban's authority and signalling widespread dissent against his government policies. Analysts suggest that the event's success could influence upcoming elections and shift public opinion in Hungary. Now we move to South Asia, where India's Ministry of External Affairs has strongly rejected the Pakistan Army's claim that New Delhi was behind the suicide bombing in North Waziristan on June the 28th, which killed 13 Pakistani soldiers. MEA spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal said in a statement on social media that the claim was rejected with the contempt it deserves. The attack involved a suicide bomber ramming an explosives-laden vehicle into a military convoy in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, a province. Pakistani military officials attributed the attack to a terror outfit called the Fitna al-Khawarij. Pakistan has witnessed a sharp surge in violence in its border regions with Afghanistan since 2021, blaming the Taliban for sheltering terror groups, a charge Kabul also denies. The June 28th attack came days after an operation in South Waziristan, which left 2 Pakistani soldiers and 12 terrorists dead. India has rejected the attempt to link it to the incident, calling the allegation baseless. Now let's turn back to Europe, where Jeff Bezos and Bezos-Sanchez concluded their extravagant 3-day wedding celebration in Venice, Italy, with glorious and glamorous pajama-themed gala, marking the culmination of a series of lavish events attended by an array of A-list celebrities. Approximately 200 guests attended the festivities, including Leonardo DiCaprio, Kim Kardashian, Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, and members of the Kardashian-Jenner family. The celebrations also featured performances by Ellie Goulding and Matteo Bocelli, with a foam party aboard Bezos' $500 million yacht preceding the main events. But as the glitter settled, critics pointed to the less glamorous backdrop. Nearly 100 private jets were reported to have flown in guests for the event, sparking fresh debates about carbon emissions and the environmental hypocrisy of ultra-wealthy climate advocates. Protesters in Venice gathered near the celebration sites, calling out ecological impact of the wedding and its contradiction with public climate commitments, especially from high-profile figures like Bezos. Venetian officials and conservatives also raised concerns about how such grand-scale events, including heavy security, crowd control and yacht traffic, stain the already fragile infrastructure of the UNESCO-listed city. Some question the optics of a €2 million donation to a lagoon study, which, though commendable, stood in contrast to the environmental cost of the multi-day spectacle. The wedding, held at the historic San Giorgio Maggiore Monastery, was a spectacle of luxury, with an estimated cost exceeding of $50 million. The couple's commitment to philanthropy was evident as they donated $2 million to a project studying the lagoons of the Veneto region. As the newlyweds depart Venice, their wedding stands as one of the most opulent and widely covered events of the year, setting a new standard for celebrity nuptials. The blend of glamour, philanthropy and star power has left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape. We stay in Europe, where thousands gathered at Scarborough's South Bay to mark Armed Forces Day with pride and patriotism in the United Kingdom. The celebration paid tribute to military personnel past and present and also honoured the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. Crowds enjoyed a packed programme at St Nicholas Gardens featuring parades, marching bands, air displays and performances by the Norwegian marching bands and Starling's aerobatic team. Alison Hume, MP for Scarborough and Whitby, praised the event as a powerful reminder of the armed forces' ongoing importance in an increasingly uncertain world. She emphasised the government's commitment to strengthening national defence. Wing Commander Toby Stewart of RAF Fylingdales also highlighted the value of public support. He said the recognition from communities adds real energy to those serving at both home and overseas. Hume, attending her first Armed Forces Day as MP, said she was proud to represent a town that puts veterans and service personnel at its heart. She gave a special mention to the Sea Cadets, saying their parents have every reason to be proud. Scarborough's Armed Forces Day continues to grow in size and spirit, bringing a strong sense of unity to the Yorkshire coast. We now move back over to Eastern Europe, where Serbia's capital of Belgrade witnessed its largest anti-government rally in months, as over 140,000 protesters took to the streets demanding early elections and an end to President Alexander Vucic's 12-year rule. Clashes erupted between demonstrators and riot police, with officers using tear gas, pepper spray and stun grenades to disperse crowds. Protesters responded with bottles, eggs and chants of "We want elections," defying an intensifying crackdown by the populist government. The protest, largely student-led, marks a peak in 8 months of nationwide unrest that began after 16 people were killed in the collapse of a newly renovated train station canopy last November, a tragedy blamed many of whom on the deep-rooted corruption. Protesters accuse Vucic's government of corruption, authoritarianism, media suppression and ties to organised crime, all of which his administration denies. Despite rising pressure, Vucic has refused to call early elections, citing a supposed foreign plot to topple his rule. Here's what some of the protesters had to say.
Pokažemo da, što kaže predsjednik Vučić, nije pobedio takozvanu obojenu revoluciju, što ovo naravno nije, ali da pokažemo da i dalje postoji taj momentum pobune.
Imamo krajnji rezultat se zna, ispunjenje svih zahteva, borimo se za to, pokazujemo još jednom koliko nas ima na nekoj strani koja samo želi pravdu i idemo do kraja, pokazujemo još jednom da nećemo stati, okupljaćemo se koliko god treba, dokle god se zahtjevi ne ispune i na kraju krajeva dokle god se za početak ti izbori ne raspišu, jer...
Pa ja se nadam da će ovaj vidovdanski protest stvarno izazvati neku reakciju kod naše vlasti i da će, kao što je prethodni kolega rekao, ili ispuniti zahtjev ili raspisati izbore. Mi se nadamo ili jednom ili drugom, ali svakako čvrsto verujemo da će ovaj dan biti presudan.
Police say dozens were arrested and at least 6 officers were injured in clashes near the president's headquarters, where pro-government loyalists have been camping for months, forming what they call a human shield. Saturday's protests fell on the Vidovan, or St. Vitus Day, a date of deep national symbolism tied to Serbian resistance and frequently invoked in times of political upheaval. President Vucic, meanwhile, appeared defiant, awarding medals in a televised ceremony and declaring on Instagram, quote, "Serbia always wins in the end." We're now joined by our guest today, Dr. Levi Nadu, who's a political analyst based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Dr. Nadu, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. We've seen these protests going on for months now, ever since this fatal train station roof collapse. What are your thoughts? Why are so many people getting behind this movement in the country of Serbia?
Thomas,  'Thomas, 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 There are growing tensions in this country on the basis of a number of factors that ordinary citizens and onlookers and indeed government cannot ignore. Some of the issues that ordinary people are raising will relate to corruption, as you indicated. They will relate to the freedom that some of the citizens feel that they are not enjoying, and indeed that is coupled with rights. When you have a situation where ordinary citizens feel uncomfortable, feel unsafe, and feel as if they are strangers in their own country, that is the source for conflict. But also, there is a constant call by ordinary citizens to see democracy existing in its totality. And the right constituency in Serbia appears to be the students. And if you need to get a motion running that talks to revolution, you need an advanced section of the population, which are the students, because these are the people that are reading every day. These are people that are studying different forms of governments, and they are also able to go out and influence society on the direction of the state. So you get the student body, you get young people, as long as they are able to communicate the message across, then you can therefore be able to have a force that you can rely on.
Dr. Nadu, Alexander Vučić has been in power for 12 years. Protesters accuse him of authoritarianism, media suppression, things like that. These 140,000 people have been onto the streets. They've had tear gas used against them, stun grenades. What are your thoughts in the type of suppression that this government is using on these protesters, and what kind of message does it send to the international community looking from the outside in?
We are living in a global village, and whatever happens in any corner of the country could easily be known everywhere. We are living in a stage where there is sufficient information that people can get at any given time. Gone are the days where you are going to have governments that are unable to engage the citizens, that are unable to ensure that they encourage people participation. Gone are the days when government is going to suppress the media, suppress people's rights in terms of protests, in terms of airing their views, because this is what citizens see happening in other countries, and they can see that others indeed are able to enjoy their rights and freedom. My expectation is that government should be able to open up channels of communication, either with the students' leadership, channels of communication with civil organizations in society, religious groupings, and all the different stakeholders, and chart the way forward for the country. Gone are the days where governments have to use force, tear gas, and intimidation in order to suppress the views of the people. And I think the ball is on the leadership of the state to ensure that they open these channels of communication, know what the ordinary citizens want, and where possible, they should be able to find one another and create peace in Serbia.
Yes, Dr. Levi Nadu, thank you very much for your insight and joining us on the programme. We now move over to the African continent for our next story, where in South Africa, political tensions have flared within the ruling coalition as President Cyril Ramaphosa fired a senior Democratic Alliance leader from his cabinet, straining ties between the African National Congress and its main coalition partner. Andrew Whitfield, one of the two deputy trade ministers, was removed from his post on Wednesday. The presidency gave no official reason, but DA leader John Steenhuisen claims Whitfield was sacked over an international trip to the United States, one he had reportedly sought permission for but received no response from Ramaphosa's office. Here's what he had to say.
Alliance's federal executive, which met at 1 p.m. today, has resolved to withdraw from the national dialogue with immediate effect. Alliance's federal executive, which met at 1 p.m. today, has resolved to withdraw from the national dialogue with immediate effect. In the absence of a president,
calling the move a calculated political assault, Steenhuisen accused the president of targeting the DA while failing to act against ANC officials implicated in corruption. He said the removal undermines trust within the coalition government that was formed after the ANC lost its majority in last year's elections. Despite growing friction between the two parties, particularly over budget priorities and racial equity policies, analysts say the multi-party alliance is likely to hold. Markets remained stable on Thursday, unlike earlier this year when tensions triggered a drop in the rand and government bonds. Steenhuisen confirmed that the DA will still support the Division of Revenue bill, a critical piece of budget legislation, even as the party's federal executive convenes to consider its next steps. President Ramaphosa has not yet commented directly on the dismissal, and no broader cabinet reshuffle is expected. But the incident highlights the fragile balance of power in South Africa's new coalition politics, a landscape where every move could shift the future of governance in the continent's most industrialized nation. Now we turn back over to South Asia, where at least 34 people, including 16 children, have died in rain-related incidents across Pakistan over the past 3 days. Heavy pre-monsoon showers have battered several regions, causing floods and house collapses. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, 19 people were killed and 6 were injured. Most casualties were reported from Swat, which suffered 13 deaths. The Provincial Disaster Management Authority confirmed fatalities in Swat, Amotabad, Charsada, Malakand, Shangla and Lower Dir and Torkar. In Punjab, 15 people died and 40 others were injured. One of the tragic incidents involved 17 members of a family that were swept away while panicking near the Swat River. The river experienced a sudden surge in water levels, catching families off guard. A total of 56 homes have been damaged in Khyber province alone. Authorities continue to monitor the situation as more rains are expected in the coming days. Rescue and relief operations are underway. Now we move on, but stay in the Indo-Pacific. South Korea's President Lee has nominated former Economy Minister Kim Jong-kwan as the new industry minister, according to the president's office. This move is part of a broader cabinet reshuffle aimed at strengthening economic and industrial policies. In a related announcement, President Lee also nominated Koo Yoon-cheol for the position of finance minister. These appointments come as South Korea faces challenges in maintaining economic growth and global uncertainties. Both nominees are expected to play key roles in steering the country's economic strategy moving forward. The nominations now await parliamentary approval before the ministers can officially take office. A Japanese climber who died on Peru's highest mountain has been recovered. Rescue teams brought down the body of 40-year-old Chaika Inada from Huascaran, which stands over 6,700 meters above sea level. Inada and her companion, Saki Terada, got lost on Monday. Rescuers found them on Wednesday, but Inada died shortly after due to severe hypothermia. Bad weather made the recovery challenging, and rescuers used ropes to lower her body safely. Terada is now in hospital and receiving treatment. A police helicopter transported Inada's body to a morgue in Huaraz, about 400 kilometers from Lima. The death toll from a devastating landslide in Cauca, Colombia, has now risen to 22, with 8 people still missing. The landslide, triggered by intense rainfall, occurred late last night, burying homes in a rural town of Rosas. Rescue operations are now underway, with Colombian military and local volunteers working to retrieve bodies and search for survivors. Despite challenging conditions, the teams are determined to locate the missing. Authorities are also focusing on providing aid to those displaced by mudslides. President Ivan Duque expressed his condolences, offering full government support for disaster relief efforts, including temporary shelters and medical supplies. He said, "Our hearts are with the victims' families." Meteorologists are warning of further rainfall, which could increase the risk of additional landslides in the region. The National Disaster Risk Management Unit has issued alerts for other vulnerable areas. This tragedy highlights the ongoing threat of landslides in Colombia's mountainous regions, especially during the rainy season. Efforts are now focused on mitigating further risks while continuing the search for survivors. Now we move over to South America, where Guyana has announced a major crackdown on gold smuggling from neighbouring Venezuela, following urging from the United States government. President Ifrán Ali has said his administration is committing enormous resources to combat the long-standing issue, including boosted border patrols and enhanced monitoring in mining regions. Authorities suspect Venezuelan sanctioned gold is being mixed with locally mined gold and then illegally sold in markets across the US, Canada, the Middle East and beyond. The US Embassy in Guyana has already suspended visas for several miners suspected of involvement. US Ambassador Nicole Theriot praised Guyana's efforts, pointing to growing bilateral cooperation on border security. The move comes as gold remains Guyana's second largest export after oil, generating nearly $1 billion in revenue last year, despite estimates that up to 50% of production is smuggled. Tensions also continue to simmer between Guyana and Venezuela over the disputed Essequibo region, a resource-rich area that makes up 2/3 of Guyanese territory. Now we move over to the United States, where thousands gathered in Minneapolis to honor slain Minnesota lawmaker Melissa Horton and her husband Mark. The funeral at the Basilica of St. Mary saw attendance from former President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz. Horton, a top Democrat and the State House Speaker, was praised as a talented legislator and mentor. The couple was killed 2 weeks ago by a man impersonating a police officer in what authorities call a politically motivated attack. Governor Walz presented military flags to the family. The suspect, Vance Bolter, faces state and federal charges. The funeral highlights calls for unity amid rising political violence in the United States. Now we turn back to Europe, where France has enacted a new nationwide smoking ban on beaches and public parks to tackle environmental pollution and promote public health. The law, which came into effect recently, applies to popular tourist destinations such as the French Riviera, Parisian parks and beaches in Marseille and Nice. The move comes in response to growing concerns about the environmental impact of cigarette butts, which contribute significantly to pollution. Cigarette butts are the most commonly found item of litter on French beaches and public spaces, causing damage to the environment and harming wildlife. By making these areas smoke-free, the government hopes to reduce the harmful effects of cigarette waste and preserve France's natural beauty. In addition to environmental benefits, health experts are backing the ban as a way to curb second-hand smoke exposure in public spaces. This is particularly important in crowded areas like beaches and parks, where families and children often gather. With this new law, France aims to create healthier, smoke-free environments for all, especially vulnerable groups such as children and individuals with respiratory conditions. Fines of up to €68 will be imposed on those caught violating the ban, a measure intended to ensure compliance. While some have questioned the practicality of enforcing the law in busy open spaces, local authorities have promised to increase monitoring and impose penalties where necessary. The smoking ban is part of a larger effort by France to reduce smoking rates, which have already been on the decline over the past decade. Measures like graphic cigarette packaging and higher taxes on tobacco products have helped reduce the number of smokers, and this ban is seen as another step towards creating a healthier and cleaner France. As the law rolls out, there are hopes that it will not only make public spaces more enjoyable for all, but also encourage further smoking reduction across the country. We stay in France for our next story, where François Ruffin, a prominent French left-wing politician and former journalist, has officially launched a new political movement in preparation for the 2027 presidential election. The move comes as Ruffin distances himself from his former ally, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and his party, France Insoumise, aiming to unite a broader spectrum of the political left. Ruffin's new campaign seeks to challenge the centrist policies of President Emmanuel Macron and the rising influence of Marine Le Pen's far right. His platform will focus on social justice, economic reforms and climate action, advocating for workers' rights, wealth redistribution and sustainable policies. In a country where the left has been fragmented in recent years, Ruffin hopes his movement will be a unifying force capable of offering a viable alternative to Macron's centrist policies and the populist rhetoric of Le Pen's national rally. With the 2027 election on the horizon, Ruffin's bold initiative signals a new chapter in France's evolving political landscape, one that aims to reshape the left-wing narrative and counter the dominance of Macron's establishment policies and Le Pen's far-right vision. Here's what Ruffin had to say.
Nous faisons le pari que dans 2 ans, nous aurons une majorité. Nous aurons un peuple debout pour des choses simples, pour des évidences, pour que les Français, tous les habitants de notre pays puissent vivre de leur travail, bien en vivre et pas en survivre. Un peuple debout pour qu'en matière d'impôts, les petits payent petits et que les gros payent gros. Un peuple debout pour l'égalité. L'égalité devant la santé, l'éducation, la police, la justice. Qu'importe le lieu d'habitation, qu'importe la couleur de peau, qu'importe la religion, nous faisons le pari que dans 2 ans, nous aurons pour tout ça un peuple.
Well, that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.